transparency and freedom of the election was our own former president, Jimmy Carter. Immediately as Hamas gets into power, Israel and the United States, followed by the European Union, smack these brutal economic sanctions on the Palestinian people. And the claim is made Hamas is a terrorist organization, that it has to renounce terrorism, join the family of civilized nations, and then these sanctions will be lifted. As a general principle, it seems to me a no-brainer, not worthy of detaining us even a moment, that terrorism is immoral, illegal, unacceptable. If we can't agree on that basic principle, we're operating in parallel moral universes, and we can't even proceed for another moment. So take as a given, for the sake of pursuing this matter, that terrorism is unacceptable, it's immoral, it's illegal. That's not an issue. The only issue that arises is the question of application of the principle. If you apply a principle across the board to all parties to a conflict, it's obviously a moral and legal principle. But if you only apply it to one side in a conflict, it's no longer a moral or legal principle. What do we call a principle that's only applied to one side? A double standard or a hypocritical principle. So, we're in a university now. We're not in Washington, D.C. So let's try to apply the principle as a moral, legal principle and not as a hypocritical one, and see what we get. Let's start with the raw data, the first level of analysis. You check the website of B'Tselem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories. Since the beginning of the Second Intifada, meaning since September 2000 till today, 4,717 Palestinians have been killed. 1,045 Israelis have been killed. A ratio of roughly 4 to 5 Palestinians killed for each Israeli killed. That's the first level of analysis. But then, we've already discussed earlier that principle of distinction. Combatants are legitimate targets, civilians are not. So to use the fancy term, we now have to disaggregate the raw numbers and look at civilians on both sides. As it happens, the ratio doesn't really change. On both sides, the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, roughly 60% of those killed were civilians. I should point out, in the Palestinian side, we're dealing with the minimum numbers, because it does not include Palestinians who die at checkpoints because they can't get to hospitals, Palestinians who die in hospitals because it's been deprived of electricity or water. We're only sticking strictly to deaths in clashes or armed fatalities. Well, some of you in this audience who have your acute faculties at work or are skeptical of what I'm saying and looking for responses, some of you are no doubt thinking, but isn't there a difference between Palestinians who target Israeli civilians and Israelis who unintentionally kill Palestinian civilians? It's a familiar argument, and I am of the school that we should dismiss, sneer, or snicker at any arguments which carry an element or an aura of credibility. We should look at them, analyze them, and see where we end up. There's this journalist writing for the New Yorker magazine. Now he writes for Atlantic magazine. His name is Jeffrey Goldberg. And recently he came out with a book called Prisoners. And it was his account of his life in Ansar III prison camp during the first Intifada. He was a guard in the camp. He also tortured Palestinians, which is to say he's the perfect expert for the New Yorker on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Well, Mr. Goldberg, at some point, he describes this vehement, passionate argument he's having with one of these Hamas militants, and in exasperation, he finally bursts out, "For God's sake, we don't try to kill children," that being allegedly the difference between Israelis and Palestinians. Palestinians intentionally kill Israelis. It's an accident. So let's again begin with the raw data. Since the beginning of the Second Intifada, 917 Palestinian children have been killed. That is more than the total number of Israeli civilians killed, 715, of whom 143 were children. So the ratio, roughly, is 9 Palestinian children killed for each Israeli child killed. So our first conclusion would naturally be, for the want of trying to kill Palestinian children, it would seem that Israelis were awfully good at it. Is it true, however, that Israel doesn't deliberately kill Palestinian children? Not if you read human rights reports. Amnesty International writes, on many occasions, Israel deliberately targeted peaceful demonstrators, many of whom are children. On other occasions, Israel used indiscriminate, excessive, and disproportionate force. One simple illustration. The first month of the Second Intifada, October 2000, Israel killed 37 Palestinian children. Of those 37, 20 died from a direct bullet shot to the head. Well, let's leave aside again the easier case. Let's look at the more difficult case. Let's take the case not of deliberate killings in the literal sense. Let's take the case of indiscriminate killings. What is the legal status of indiscriminate killings? What is an indiscriminate killing? Somebody there throws a stone at me, I take my machine gun and just indiscriminately fire in the crowd. Under international law, indiscriminate killings are exactly the same as deliberate killings. There's no difference under international law. Why? Some of you have a puzzled look in your face. Because under the law, the inevitable and foreseeable consequences of an act count as an intention. Let me repeat that. The inevitable and foreseeable consequences of an act count as an intention. Already a fellow decided I'm not going to stay any longer, this is getting reformed. Let's try to put it in language which everybody can understand. Let's take a case. There's probably a few people in this room right now who are absolutely appalled, disgusted, filled with loathing at what I've been saying, can barely control your anger, your fury, and you decide now to rush up to the platform, pull out your dagger, and plunge it into my heart, not forgetting the extra twist because of Dr. Finkelstein. And alas, I am, at least in my opinion, prematurely dispatched to my maker. At that point, the security, presuming they're still alert, and and haven't been bored here by my remarks.